Thank you, Mr. Ravichander, and good evening, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Andrew Collister, and I'm the Vice Consul at the Australian Consulate General in Chennai. You might be asking, Chennai, why am I here in Bangalore? Well, we cover the 5 South Indian states for the Australian government. We have the High Commission in New Delhi, obviously, but we also have offices in Mumbai, Kolkata, and here in Chennai. We've been open for about 10 years, and our job, you know, when you think about foreign policy, you think about prime ministers meeting prime ministers, or you think about trade negotiations happening in secret hotel rooms, which both of those do happen, but it's not really at the genesis of what foreign policy is about. Because foreign policy is about people. It's about creating respect, understanding between countries, and that's what leads to friendly relations and much more richer relationships. And that's what the bedrock of our work is here down in South India. It's not just working with business, it's also presenting an image of Australia that is not just kangaroos and cricket. So everyone, I love kangaroos, I love cricket, and you know they're warm and friendly, and we have great tosses on the field. But Australia, it's a diverse country. It's an educated country. It's got much to offer India in science and education. And that is the pillar of our new India economic strategy, which we released last year, that for our engagement for the next 15 years over economic engagement is split into 10 priority sectors and 10 priority states. And 2 of those sectors are education, our flagship sector, and science and innovation. And Karnataka, obviously with Bangalore as the big hub, is one of our priority states. Why I tell you that is because with Stuart Kohlhagen here this evening, is a much better proponent than me of convincing you that Australia has much to offer India in education and science. And we're really proud to partner with the BIC and Mr. Ravichander because you know, we could hold this anywhere in Bangalore, but you know, if we hold this at an IIT or the ISC, we wouldn't know who to go to. We need a good partner in these cities. We're not known by a lot of the audience, as evidenced by most people asking me tonight, oh, the Australian Consulate General has never done anything. So I really want to thank Mr. Ravichander with this audience and yourselves. You're an intellectual crowd. You're interested, obviously, in the subject matter because it's not, as we were saying before, Stuart, it is a tad niche. So you'll have a very interesting evening. And he's had a wonderful couple of days here in Bangalore teaching teachers about computational thinking, which he'll go into much more detail than I will because he's the expert. But to introduce him briefly, Dr. Kohlhagen was part of the team that founded Questacon, Australia's National Science and Technology Centre, back in the 1970s. And he was there for many decades until taking an early retirement in 2017. Since then he's worked as the science nomad, taking his message about computational thinking and the new science of learning science across the world. He's travelled to more than 20 countries with his message, and we're really proud to bring him to you tonight in Bangalore. Stuart.
So, first of all, namaste. That's the extent of all my English, Indian languages. I'm mute in every single one of them, virtually. I would very much like to thank the High Commission and the consuls across India. This is, for me, my 4th visit to India. 3 of those visits I have come or started the program in Bangalore, so it's my home base in India. I'm beginning to feel that way. I'd very much like to thank them for their support, and in particular their strength in finding good partners, because again, for me, that's everything about the work which I do, and we'll see a little bit of that. And of course, we're here with the great support from the International Centre itself. I should start, I think. Some people that know me quite well sort of feel that I can pretty much fix or solve any problem. But I must, before we start, confess that there'll be 2 things which I will not be able to fix completely. That one of those will be the Indian education innovation system. At the end of this talk, that won't be finished being overhauled. And the other thing which I have as a challenge is time. And so I will do my best to go and get through this in 40 minutes because I know Indians reasonably well. You will want to talk about what we share. And that's one of the reasons I love coming to India. So let's start with that, because the quickest way to finish is to start. I'm full of very useful short ideas, as you will discover during the course. Yes, so I've worked with Questacon. I started with Questacon before it opened with our founding director. It was in a disused school. We were all volunteers. It was about twice the size of this space. It was entirely volunteer run, and within 8 years we had grown and been recognised for the impact we're having, to the extent that the Japanese government, another one of our friends, along with India, joined in and actually funded half the cost of transforming our small schoolroom into a national science centre. The National Science Centre is not just the building, although it's a pretty building. Most of our audience we reach outside the building. Before we started, we were an outreach organisation. And so I've grown up, literally those 37 years, in Questacon, being very familiar with what you can do with nothing. So we were unfunded, volunteer-run, small science centre, and that's still my passion. Small is beautiful, as far as I'm concerned, as far as organisations are concerned. Very much better to be a good small organisation than a large bad one. Questacon is, I think, a great medium-sized organisation. We do a lot of outreach. And so we understand that you need to go and actually go to where the people are. It's an arrogance to think that everyone will come to you as a national organisation. So we take the end very seriously, and we get out to where people are. That's given me a lot of experience in getting out and around, which I'm sort of using now as a science nomad. Most recently, and during my time at Questacon, I started designing and building exhibits, hands-on exhibits. We're exclusively interactive. We design and build all those exhibits. It's free choice. It's self-guided. And so from the very beginning, we would build and watch and see how people would learn experientially. All right? This is not worksheets. I would burn them if they brought them into the building. We don't do that sort of thing. We see how people learn through experience, and that's always been part of what we've done. And I started work as our first exhibit designer. As you heard, sort of took early retirement. I did step aside. I wasn't pushed. That ended up being Director of Science and Learning. And in that role, I headed up the development of our exhibitions, the development of our outreach programs, our interactions with the education system, and our work with research organisations. I had the good job. The other director looked after HR, the building, finances, and I loved her for that because it allowed me to do the good job. That building we took over about 8 years ago now, 8 years ago. It used to be the National Mint. We took it over, we were given it, and we run that as our Technology Learning Centre. This, again, is a project which I started before leaving, and it signified a step that we took as an organisation towards working with formal education. So we were an informal educator, free choice, and we started to work very closely with the formal education system. And so we worked with academics, we worked with teachers, the Science Teacher Associations, education researchers. We started working with a whole group of those people who had a different but similar interest in kind of learning outcomes. So we opened up the Technology Learning Centre, and through that we amplified a lot of the work that we were doing in what you might call STEM outcomes, but what I would prefer to call 21st century skills. Now, we can argue about the meanings of those words later, or we can just move on to the critical matter of what they actually are about rather than the definitions. In that space, we bring together, as the summary event, we have a national program called the Invention Convention. It's part of the Smart Skills program. We're very careful about how we work to achieve impact. I could come in and blow some things up, and you would enjoy the session, the kids would enjoy the session, and tomorrow nothing much would change, except you would wonder when I'm coming back. You might think your teachers are even more boring. as a result of doing that. So you can actually do harm through that sort of a public program. So what we do is when we go into a school with this program, the first thing we do is we engage with the teachers and we do PD with the teachers to get them to understand how we are going to run a workshop. They then co-deliver the program that we work with their students. So we're not pushing the teachers aside, we're upskilling them, partnering with them, so that when we leave, the teacher is at a higher level and seeing better by the students. Students have had a great outcome. And we will then tell the teachers to remind the kids that we'll be back in a month, and if they've got any interest in doing innovation or STEM projects, they should foster that with the students using the techniques we've shared, and they can come to a regional invention convention where we will get them to partner with some of the interesting people in their community. And Questacon almost exclusively serves underrepresented communities, disadvantaged communities. So we will find who are the cool people in their community, who's doing some manufacturing. It might be in horticulture, it might be fisheries, it might be R&D for biomed. There'll be something there, and we will find the interesting people, and at the regional invention convention, we will bring them in so the students can discover, oh, there are some cool options in town, and you're not much older than I am, and so we're going to have a chat, and then go, hey, why don't you bring your school in to have a look at what we're doing? Invention conventions, then the students will go and learn about the design process and innovation and what's cool and how did you get into your job on there. That sounds great. They will learn those. They will learn of those opportunities. Ultimately, across the nation, then we will bring those people that are most interested. The golden ticket is not. It's not a competition. The golden ticket is you are taking your ideas seriously. So write to us and let us know why you take your idea seriously, and that's the golden ticket to come to Canberra. Because you might be smart and your dad helped you with it, and the rest of that, we don't care too much. You really are passionate about this and you've got a story about why this is important, you're coming. And so we will then work with those students, and when they're in Canberra, the kinds of cool people they meet are Nobel Prize winners that discovered dark matter. These are the people that are studying bee vision and working out how to go and make simple lenses so that drones can get, excellent vision as they fly around 360, and you can come up with a small computer to process the vision. That's the kind of cool people we bring them into. We take them to IP Australia that manages our patent law. We take them over to our innovation hub. We've got some wonderful, excellent people doing innovation support in Canberra, as there are in many cities, Bangalore included. And they will meet these people who are in the next step of doing entrepreneurship and innovation. And we will say, tonight's your chance to go and do some networking. So get your cards ready, get your elevator pitch ready. You're going to meet some more cool people, connect with them, and they will let you know what you can do next. So when we're doing programs, we don't just run a program and put it in a box. If we want you to possibly take a journey towards being an innovator or an entrepreneur, if we take you this far, it's really our job to go, and the next people you need to work with are these two people over here. Because if we can't find who you should work with next, how are you going to do it? And so we think through what are all the barriers to you actually succeeding in that journey, and it's our job to go and work it out, because we want to do it, and we do it fairly well. So we get 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 13-year-olds starting businesses. All right, about 2 or 3 each year will start a business which is going well enough the next year for them to come back and be a mentor with the next year's group. We do similar things with teachers that Autumn and I have been doing for the past month here across southern India. We skill them up, we give them, how do you work with students to foster that kind of thinking, foster that attitude. Some of it's content, but it's mostly approach, is what we share. That's our space. It's a pretty cool space. It's kind of somewhere between a garage, a workshop, a laboratory. One of the t-shirts I wear says, if I can't make a mess, I can't make anything. And so we designed the space that invited you to make a mess. That should be your natural reflex. It's okay for me to draw on the floor. This afternoon, before you came in, we had half of our computational thinking program sketched out on the floor. Hopefully it's gone. It'll be gone by tomorrow. Citing graph theory for people that have never heard of it before. I'm an adjunct at Australian National University that we kind of gave birth to the Science Centre. We then gave birth to a department in the university that looks after science communication. I still work there. Through Questacon, I've been principal investigator with the Science of Learning, a big multi-university research project that was started expressly to do research, to collect data, to inform what is best practice in classroom teaching. It wasn't an ivory tower esoteric project. This was, what do we need to know to go and help a teacher know how to do what they're doing best? And that was a great project. From that, one of the outcomes, if you're interested in looking at the website slrc.org, or email me afterwards and I'll share any of these links. One of the things which we came out of after 3 years of research are what we call PEN principles. These are principles that you can apply in the classroom that are supported by evidence that comes from psychology, the P, educationalists, the E, and neuroscience, the N. So this entire multidisciplinary team was put together to go, what does psychology tell us about learning? What do educators know about learning? What's neuroscience telling us about how people learn? What's the synthesis of this? And so there were separate research papers, but the result of that particular project, there was, amongst many other outcomes, were these simple one-page flyers, so we had about 12 of those, which were just looking at how the brain works and what does that mean in the class. You can apply this to the rest of your life as well. So go and download them and have a look. But this stuff is actually not only interesting, but also important. And we link the practitioners, the educators, back to what the research says. So it's not I like or I reckon. This is what the data says. And this is how we see it works. We won't go into all of that in detail, but we will touch on some of it. One of the other universities I'm an adjunct with is University of Canberra, the SLRC. That university decided it was going to excel in training educators of science as teachers. And so they took the science and maths faculty and the education faculty and put them into one super faculty. If you want to be a history teacher, don't go to the University of Canberra. You will not get a good degree in history teaching from that. But you'll get an excellent one in how to be an educator in science and mathematics. This research group is established to provide the research framework and the data to inform how the training of teachers would take place. So very evidence-based, very data-driven in the process, and enormous fun. Enormous fun. One of the projects that the SLRC worked on, I was involved in the project, was developing a combination of apps and real stuff. So the only reason I was working with SLRC was we all feel the value of real stuff. We didn't want to do any tablets or apps, but the department said, no, it has to be an app. So he said it didn't. And so they eventually gave us $6 million. And that project is now in its 5th year. It's been refunded, $8 million. It's being trialled in 130 early learning centres to get students ready to enter a world which is coming, which you might think of as a STEM world or a 21st century world. And this is aimed at 4-year-olds. Okay? Lots of the activities I do are good for 4-year-olds. They will also hurt an undergraduate engineer if you're not careful. So you need to treat them carefully. These are some of the characters from it. The app that we developed was really a home for activities and instruction and support for the educators, and a way of connecting what the students were doing and collecting to journal that and share that with the educator and share it with the parents. So the parents could see what they were doing and get more activities to do at home to foster the same process. So we used the technology, we thought, judiciously. It's not games on the app, particularly. There's a few of those. So as a result of that kind of experience, or those various experiences, I kind of see myself kind of probably in the middle of that diagram. I'm not particularly good at anything, but I know a lot of people who are excellent at what they do. And so I'm in a position, and today is an example of taking what I know to be kind of useful there, pulling that in, synthesizing that, and then sharing it back out with those people that I think would benefit from connecting with that content. So some of those teachers, just the last month here, we kind of worked with a few hundred Indian teachers again. education researchers, the informal educators, and brain science, which is one of the areas I'm interested in. Last couple of years I've been busy. Those are all points where we've run programs. So I understand at least a little about how different education systems work, what challenges are consistent or common across various geographic and cultural contexts. I do most of my work with poor and state schools and teachers of that. That would be my preference. I will work with most people, but this is something you're all familiar with. This is sort of getting towards why we're talking about innovation today. We often feel this challenge. I collected that Brexit sign long ago. I thought it would be out of date by now, but it's apparently not. It's still relevant. There's a skill shortage. If you talk to industry, they come up with a very similar collection of, oh, these are the sorts of skills we want. If you talk to education systems, and perhaps parents as well, they've got concerns which are kind of fueled in part by their concern about transformation of the economy, about standards of living. They're going, oh, we need to do better. How are our Pisa results? How are we going with our maths? What's our literacy like? And so we have both of these active interests at play. The focus often on kind of the Pisa results, the formal academic training, in many education systems drives towards this. Testing or over-testing, which is a feature of many education systems. And the moment testing is seen as the game and the results are your score, then the time in the school, even if the teacher is keen to be progressive and teach for skills and outcome, the time will be very hard to fight for to go and invest in 21st century skills. And the students understand what the game is as well, and so do the parents. And so there is a real challenge built into the systems. It's not the teacher's fault. It's a result that if you set the rules up this way, that's how the game will play. All right? So if that's what you're showing is valued, if that's what you're assessing, we should not be surprised that the teaching follows that line and the students get the skills which the rules have set up to create. So that should indicate what we might do to change that. And the challenge then is how do you implement such a change? And there are many, many views about how you might implement a change to achieve that. That kind of teaching to exam from an educational learning point of view kind of generates what sort of I call a sip and spit approach to education. I thank my son for standing in for the model for that. He was quite happy to spit on the floor. You load it in, you pass the exam, you eject it, you are unchanged. You've taken nothing in, literally. And you know that's true, to a large extent. It's not black and white, but there's much which you absorb that you get rid of and you feel you'll never use again and you won't remember it. In my role with Questacon, I've got to work with the chief scientist in Australia, particularly the education officers attached there, and to spend some time working with business councils who are also interested in how they transform their skills. So business councils are very interested in skills supply for their industries. Here's a list. So this is the result of a survey that was conducted with one of the business councils, industry councils in Australia, just last year. This is their ranking for what they saw as the critical skills. Just take a moment to have a look through that list. And as you're going through it, I'd like you to think which industry this survey came from, which industry sector it came from. Any suggestions, any thoughts? What does it look like?
Banking. Agriculture.
Banking, agriculture.
Government.
Sorry?
Technology. IT.
Consultancy.
Sorry?
Consultancy.
Consultancy?
Education.
Yep. Okay. All of those would probably look like that. This came from our furniture makers. And I'm actually proud that our furniture makers see that as the required skills. Because in Australia, our labour is expensive. We can't compete with you on cheap labour, or anyone on cheap labour, on there. And so we know that if you're going to be a furniture maker, you're going to have to be really efficient. You're going to have to be really quick. We've got to out-design you. We've got to have stuff you want to pay more for. And all of that leads to the realisation that those are the skills for our furniture makers. So if our furniture makers want these skills, gosh, pretty much everyone's going to want those skills. And so we should be thinking about how, as an education system, we're helping. All right? I think it's telling, and you laughed, and that was good. I think it's also important, and I'm sure you agree that it is. So we've got a recently new focus, again, a renewed focus on innovation in Australia. Here's another forward-looking document, reasonably fresh within Australia, looking forward to 2030. Within that document, it's identified what it's calling imperatives. So not even priorities. These are imperatives. These are the chunks that we've identified, and none of those would surprise you. And if India did the same, I'm sure that the list would look much the same. In fact, it would probably be in the same order than that. You can see, again, why Australia is always interested in education, and we're doing it pretty well on there. It's not perfect, we're not solved, we're not top in the world, but we're doing pretty well, particularly in this area of kind of innovation and some of those 21st century skills. Not there yet, but we're doing pretty well. Pretty much everyone will kind of look at those lists and agree that, oh, this would be pretty good if we could graduate students with this kind of skill set. These are different labels for the 21st century skills: problem solving, collaborative, communicative, agile, lifelong learners. You'll see different labels. They really fall back to that same set of ideas. The question then becomes, well, how do we get that out of our education systems? Here's one of the things which, again, working with University of Canberra, and this came from our work with thinking into and researching into what we would do with 4-year-olds. And we're becoming increasingly confident that what's good for a 4-year-old is pretty good for an 8-year-old. And if we did that with 14-year-olds, we'd probably be on the way to improving things. And so we've taken kind of what was the STEM topic. We were never going to be teaching coding or 3D printing to 4-year-olds in any universe. And we looked at what are the habits of mind, the dispositions, if you like, the dispositions of thinking that would have a child ready to embrace and function well in that kind of world. And so we broke it down into these chunks. You can see you could collapse it a little bit further if you wanted. Some of those are a little bit repetitive, perhaps. We've got these general ideas: problem finding, questioning, proposing. We've got a bunch of different methods. How do you do this stuff when you're doing this stuff? You know, generating ideas, ideation. One of the things I'm really passionate about, and part of what I did on the project, was the encoding and decoding. This is, again, not cyber encryption, but it does help with that. We deal in a world with all sorts of languages, not just Hindi and Marathi and English on there. All the symbols that we use, all of this stuff, this translation of one set of ideas into a different domain, we are taking ideas and we're doing a translation, encoding it from one to another. And then these values, with curiosity, one of my favourite words, imagination, creativity. And again, none of you would argue against those as being useful habits, dispositions, traits. The question then is how do we support those? And in particular, given that we must acknowledge the inertia in any education system, not just an Indian education system, there is a real challenge. Even if you understood what the pathway to perfect change was, recognising that you've got significant inertia, an enormous body of previously trained teachers and educators trained under a different model is one of the things, but also just the general evaluation frameworks, assessment frameworks, and the rest of those are significant elements that add to the inertia of that. How do you make progress? I'm a big believer in curiosity, and not just as a fluffy thing. It's not just a fluffy idea. I take curiosity really seriously. This is what it looks like with some students. These are in Papua New Guinea, up in a mine site, 4,000 metres up. That's what curiosity looks like when they're learning. That's what curiosity looks like in Mumbai, when I've got some students at a very impoverished community school exploring resonance and vibration. That's what curiosity looks like when they're doing encryption, decryption, and cybersecurity mathematics. And the day it's monsoon season in Mumbai, so of course it rained and water came in, we had to move the tables. It's that sort of school. They're doing the mathematics of cybersecurity, and they're enjoying it. And the team I work with today wouldn't stop doing theirs either. Okay. This stuff doesn't require sophisticated materials. It does not require a long time to set up. Here are some educators working with Agastya Foundation here in India. Someone I work with with a massive reach across the country. This is them exploring ideas. We're starting to get now in the presentation, and thank you for staying with me. Coming to some of the science, the research. What's data telling us about curiosity? We all like to be curious. Does anyone here feel that they learn best about those things they're personally interested in? Or is it just me? Fantastic. So why don't we harness that in education? Really? We all learn best those things we're interested in. Why wouldn't we use that as part of our education system? We recognize internationally that as you get older, as you go through school, curiosity, and here it's referred to as intrinsic motivation. I'm doing it because I want to. That's not, I'm doing it because I want my dad to be happy that I'm doing well. That's a good reason, but it's mentally different. It's a biologically different process. And so are competitions. Competitions are toxic. Competitions hold the bulk of people back. Who would like to enter a maths Olympiad against me? Right, so the competition's not motivating for you, is it? It's demotivating. You'd actually do quite well. I'm terrible at arithmetic. As students go through school, their level of intrinsic motivation drops. All right, okay, so they get bored. That's a pity. There's some things you have to learn. But it's actually worse than that. As the curiosity falls, so do the grades. So if you survey a class, those students that are in the top quartile, the top 20%, 25%, I told you I was bad at maths, top 20% is a quartile. In the top 25%, they will get a grade higher. The students that are in the lowest quartile are a grade lower of curiosity. And it's even stranger than that, but true, that those students that are most strongly externally motivated do half a grade worse. So all because you're spending the time and you really want your dad happy, on average, not an individual, but on average they will get poorer grades by about a half grade. This is a very large cohort. The results from a meta-study done in America. And the results they're getting are not from fluffy stuff. The results they're measuring are in the Californian aptitude test. Reading, writing, maths. Core skills. So curiosity is good for your grades in things like maths, reading, and science. We do a lot of practice, we do a lot of drill. That's okay. That's necessary. You've got to get some competence in basic skills. But even the way we do that, we tell you that the revision is on subtraction, so I don't have to think about what tool to use. So there's not even problem solving. And we give you all of the problems in the same format. We don't give you 7 minus what equals 15. That might seem like a simple thing to do, and it is on a practice sheet, but that actually allows you to think of at least 2 different strategies to solve the problem. You can solve the problem additively or subtractively. And if you took the title off it and mixed up some addition and subtraction problems, you'd get better at recognizing what kind of problem it was. We hear from teachers everywhere that when students encounter word problems in maths, they do badly. And they sort of blame, oh, it's a literacy thing, they're not familiar with the words. That might be true, but the bigger thing is a word problem doesn't tell you that it's an addition problem or a multiplication problem. And so it's the fact that the students don't understand what kind of problem it is, they don't know how to tackle it. And we've trained them not to think, to spot the problem. All right? So it's not just a literacy thing. We've discovered through some of the research, not us, but internationally, it's now recognised that this process of mixing things up. So I don't teach you addition for 3 weeks and then multiplication for 3 weeks and then subtraction and then fractions for 3 weeks. If I get you a bit of addition and we move on to subtraction, but we mix subtraction and addition together, and as we go we keep mixing it, you'll do better. This is about a half grade difference. The same boring stuff, just interleaved. It's called interleaving. That will give you some novelty, it will give you problem solving practice, and you'll get better grades. This is your brain. This is your brain when it's curious. These parts of the brain are activated. This is where your brain makes a memory. And our brain is like a chemical sponge. So if we activate that part of the brain through curiosity, we also are activating the same part of the brain that forms memories. It's one of the big reasons we remember the stuff we're curious about. It's chemistry. And we should make use of that. Here's a quick, I'll try and be quick from here. Here's an experiment. The experiment design was to go and get a bunch of trivia questions, get a group to assess, is this an interesting trivia question or a boring trivia question? What's the molecular weight of, I don't know, caffeine? I don't care. It's a trivia question, but not a particularly interesting one. And these questions were then presented to people whilst they're actually in an MRI scan, having their brain scanned to see what else was going on. You would be asked the question, given some time to think about the answer, and shown an irrelevant face, just from a line-up. And then you'd be given the answer, asked another question, shown an irrelevant face that's got nothing to do with argon, or whatever the question was, and then that would be repeated, and you would come in the next day, and they would go, can you remember the atomic weight of argon? No. So you don't recall very well. You also couldn't recognize the faces that you were shown. If you were given trivia questions that were rated as being likely to inspire curiosity, you would remember what the term dinosaur meant, or whatever the trivia question was, but you would also remember the faces you saw. Better. It's not 100%, but better. This is that effect. You get curious, you remember the boring stuff you get shown afterwards. Better. And that's gold in a school where, I'm sorry that there are some boring things you're going to have to get across. So if I take 5 minutes at the start of the day to get you wondering, a little confused, a little curious, and go, all right, time for that, we'll come back to it tomorrow. You will remember the boring stuff for the first half of that day better than if we hadn't puzzled you first. And that's not hard to do. We do a lot of that. Autumn and I do a lot of puzzling people. I puzzle them, she helps them understand. So being curious helps you remember things you're not even curious about. One of the things which is very important, we do this to our learners all the time, it's far too often, is as educators we know something, we want you to know something, there's a problem, I'm going to show you how to solve the problem, and then you know the answer to that problem, but you're not confident in solving problems yourself. You're not strengthened by that process. If you wanted to develop someone as a marathon runner, you wouldn't sit them down and talk to them about marathon running, and then put them in a car and drive them to the end to go, this is what it's like to finish the marathon. But we do that with our learners all the time when we're doing problem solving. We won't give them a problem, we'll talk about the problem, and then we'll show them how to answer the problem, which is us taking them to the finish line. And we never gave you the time to struggle and sweat and build a bit of strength and resilience and confidence that it's hard, but I can do it. And without that confidence, there isn't that thing called resilience or grit, which is another term in education. If you don't have it, you're never going to go through a hard problem. And so these are important ideas to get across to educators, which I share a lot. Part of the process that we use to go through this. Again, we developed this with University of Canberra. It's kind of one of the ideas behind our early learning stuff. Is this idea, give people the experience first. Let them play. Let me deliberately provide things which are going to puzzle you and get you questioning. We had a group from Augustia here earlier today. I didn't ask them questions. I just made sure that the stuff they were doing was going to get them asking questions and puzzled. And they were going off, talking about it, asking it, collaborating, trying new things, seeking solutions. Once you've done that, we would then bring them back to a more formalising stage, representation. All right, this is what pressure really is. You couldn't sort it out before, but you saw what was happening. This is a way to think about pressure. I'm going to represent it for you. I'm going to get you to show me your thoughts on what pressure is about. We'll formalise it. And we're doing that, and as we're doing it, it's making sense of what you know, because you've already experienced it. You just didn't understand it as science. And so giving you this formalisation when you've had the experience makes sense. You're making sense of the things I've seen. So that question really makes a space in your head for us to go and put the information in. Without the question, it just bounces off, literally. This is some teachers that we're working with. They're actually learning computer science. It might not look like it. Here is a group in one of the poorest provinces in Thailand. Been working with this school for 3 years. Finally, I thought they're at the stage where we should actually move to computers in our computational thinking. They've never done any software coding. We're actually doing a line-following robot, but we don't have a robot. So they're thinking about how to write instructions. So it's called unplugged. It's unplugged computing. And so these kids are going, oh, you just go that way 4 and then you turn left and the rest of them go, oh, well, let's write it up. And then we would work with them to go, how do we make this simpler, smaller? What if I change the number of squares? You know, oh, you've got to write all your instructions again. How do we group that? So we're dealing with the thinking behind the algorithms, not, oh, here's Java, learn Java first. They will get there. Within about half an hour, this is a year 7 boy on there, we developed this language in Calcutta. Does anyone here speak Bengali? So it's called tir. Tir, tir. Dart, arrow, in Bengali. Tir. Sorry, I'm dyslexic. I can't even write in English, let alone speak in Bengali. So our programming language was tir on there. Dart, arrows. And so they're writing in a few arrows. This boy has not done algebra before. He's building this expression, this software, using algebra and tir. And we then take that and they would decode it and give it to the robot, my friend, who would have to follow and execute the functions. And they were getting algorithmic thinking. This all happening organically in about an hour. We got to this point. We then moved to the computers, and in this school I teach the students and the teachers at the same time. And that's scary for teachers, to be a student with their students. And Thailand is very respectful of that kind of seniority. So if you work with these people and get their trust, you can get that to happen. And this is really powerful for them. I brought some stuff. We put some of the stuff together. This is a little Arduino. They don't have soldering irons, so we use paper clips to go and connect all the stuff together. The school, this is the girls learning how to wire the stuff up, clip it together. The school funds itself by growing organic vegetables, which it sells in Bangkok, about 5 hours away. That's one of the main sources. Not highly skilled workforce. The entire province is low-skilled agriculture, subsistence agriculture. These students, we put together a dead plant from the principal's office on there, and we then sort of applied our thinking to save the plant. So we had water sensors, rain sensors, humidity sensors, switches to turn the pumps on, and they were dealing with, okay, how do you get this stuff to work? All right, so within a day, they learned enough, and they were facilitated, I scaffolded the event there, so that they could then see, oh, I know the bits, I know how this goes together, and now maybe if I got these skills, I could stay in China and have a good living and help people with their harvests on that. So big possible change. Again, it's just working the right way. None of this is rocket science or expensive or hard. Just it's an approach. This is in Dili. These are student teachers. Again, we're going through doing some maths, working backwards with some mathematics projects in there. We did that today. They were so keen, if you give them an 8 dice problem, that normally takes about 15 minutes. They decided they were going to come back and do a 21 dice problem. They didn't understand the mathematics properly. The maths is kind of like this. So 28 dice, they would still be doing it if I hadn't stopped them. This is one of the schools. You can adapt that activity to use playing cards. This is from one of the teachers that came to a workshop in that previous school. They're running these programs in the schools. There is uptake. So if you give the teachers the right orientation, give them tools that are available and accessible, they will do the activities. They will do the activities. Nearly there, folks. Here is one of the schools in lowland Papua New Guinea. Showing you some of the things, getting the students engaged, personally engaged. It's that curiosity that drives learning. This is a challenge, an ice ball challenge. I go to the school the day before, fill up a balloon with water, put it in the freezer. Hopefully they've got freezer. Power doesn't go off, and we're going to make a big frozen balloon of ice. We burst it out, and we then give them 2 short bits of really slippery polypropylene rope. And the instructions are, you've got to pick up the ice and get it from this end of the school to the other end of the school without dropping the ice, and you can't touch the ice. Dry. Okay? So this is one of the boys going to be thinking about the problem on there. They've got to get it to the far end. This is one of the teams that managed to sort it out. You can see the reaction to achievement. And that's nice. But back at the other end, there was a group of girls who had been working for about 15 minutes, and they had just managed to get their ice up, and then it slipped down. That's their reaction to failure. You need that reaction to failure to continue with innovation. All right? You want people with that attitude. All right, let's try again. All right? This comes from intrinsic motivation. If they were externally motivated to do it, that would have been boring, crushing, and I'm not going to try it ever again. All right? Curiosity makes a big difference. As far as innovation is concerned, we'll have to go quickly through here, I'm sorry. As I said, I'm terrible at time. Most other things I can deal with. Innovation. How does that fit back with innovation? One of the things as an observer of India, I'm no Indian expert, a casual visitor there. You guys, as a culture, you recognize the importance of education, you talk about it all the time, you raise up experts, not quite as demigods, but you show them a lot of respect around there, and that is truly wonderful. Your interest in kind of popularizing science is in one of the top 5 in the world, how much effort you put into popularizing science, and every bit of that is good. One of the things, though, is kind of the focus, whether it's in a science competition, a science fair, a science festival, is, if I was characterizing it as kind of sip and spit, remembering facts, retelling pat answers or model answers, versus innovating and trying and coming up with something not quite so nice, but of your own. India's activities are more up this end, even in the informal space within schools. So we'll have a quiz, and that's okay, quizzes are good, but that's more about content. So I can ask you a question, you can give me the answer, and I can assure you, you might not understand any of it. But you will know that if I ask you about a mirror, and what happens in a mirror, what happens to the image, you go, oh, it's lateral inversion. Okay? And that's true, but that's my question. That's not the answer. lateral inversion is the name of the thing, which is this is flipped left and right and not top and bottom. You understand reflection, but can you explain to me why it's flipped left and right, but not top and bottom? Room got quiet, that normally happens. It's okay. So all of these things, we've seen this kind of contrast between sort of academic excellence, recollection, memory, and fact, versus some of these other soft skills. We kind of see where they are. Hopefully you've got a little bit of a feel from going through with that. There are some small changes you can make, and they're supported by data, supported by learning science, that even if you... I guess my message, I'm not quite finished, but if I had one message, it's you don't have to wait for the education system to be transformed. Looking around the room, there's only 2 or 3 people here who are young enough to wait for the education system to be transformed. It's going to be slow, but the people don't have to wait for that. These small changes, informed by the science of learning, interleave some of the stuff. Just take 5 minutes out to find something to get them curious about. Don't answer every question. Leave a question with them for a while. Don't drive them to the finish line every time. Just even doing that occasionally will give them some strength, and will give the teacher a clearer indication about where their students are up to. So here's another example. They'll build a model, it'll be great, but there hasn't necessarily been a lot of understanding or solving of problems, perhaps, going behind the creation of those models and explaining what's in the model. And that's not bad stuff, it's just what isn't happening. Singapore has recognised this, and when a country like Singapore recognises it, everyone should pay attention. They're pretty focused about outcomes. So in Singapore, 2004, 2005, they came up with the approach which they called teach less, learn more, which really kind of epitomises everything I've been saying. They're doing it in a very clinical fashion, but it's the same idea. It's the same idea. So I'll just leave you with this. One of the approaches which I have with a lot of my work is summed up in this kind of approach. If I give you an answer, you stop thinking. If I ask you a question, you might start thinking. But if I can get you to ask your own questions, then there won't be an end to your questions. So hopefully there won't be an end to your questions tonight, but we will stop, and we'll have some people here to let us know when we should stop. I'd like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully some of that met with your expectations about what we were going to cover tonight. Thank you very much for your attendance. If we've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and dodge them. So thank you. How could I be surprised?
My question is, I have something to show it to you.
Yep.
Whether it is universal or whether it is something particular for particular cities. There is a leading newspaper of Bangalore,
Yep.
which shares, it says, Indian student can't apply real
Applied science.
problem
Yep.
to science.
Yep.
They said that those who do higher learning or get very good marks in this and that, they cannot add or this thing, they cannot tell how much is the interest or something very, very simple thing, which is a very necessary for day-to-day life. Is it so universally so, or is it all brilliant people have got that weakness?
Oh, there. So it depends on exactly what you think brilliant people might be. So this really speaks to one of those first slides that I showed, which was industry wants these skills. Our fears, phobias, and education systems and the pressures on those push towards academic outcomes. I will teach you how to use the equation, how to use the formula, but not when to use the formula, or to recognise the problem and which formula it might need. And so this is largely an outcome of that approach, that they are not allowing them to actually experience the problems and getting strength in solving problems. Whether it's as, I won't say trivial, whether it's as direct as, say, doing their interest calculations, which I think is a terrible motivation for me to study maths, when I enjoy the beauty of mathematics. But what you're saying is absolutely true. Today we had some excellent graduates, and they're science communicators, and they understand the idea that pressure is force over an area, but I gave them a balloon and asked them how to work out the pressure in the balloon. This is a problem that you need to work backwards. We always teach the pressure stuff forwards. We had a room full of graduates. They were silent about it, didn't have an idea about where to start. And I'm not blaming them, but they haven't been given the training to explore how to think about problems. It's absent from much of education. It doesn't have to be a separate topic that's taught on Wednesday afternoon. You can do it just by a small change in how you're currently doing the teaching, which is being done at the moment.
So is it so everywhere it's like that?
Oh, it's a feature of any system where you've got an overemphasis only on the rote learning and direct instruction. And again, direct instruction is not the problem, it's the absence of the other stuff which is the critical issue on
They
that.
get good marks in competitive exam. They will get selected everywhere. But some simple things like that,
Sure.
something out of syllabus,
Yeah,
very much the same subject, little bit out of syllabus,
yeah,
zero.
yeah. Because they haven't been given any strength or opportunity to try it. Yeah. Yeah.
I was interested to know about making small changes in the classroom.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you to list 5 small changes in classrooms, what could they be?
Well, start the day with a puzzling question that you're not setting the class as an exam. You're going, I saw this morning, and I'm a teacher. I'm not sure about why that happens. So express to them not knowing is a good thing, and being inquisitive is a good thing, and that let's have a chat and see if we can work out why. That will get them curious. Alternate, change, interleave, mix things up. It's good. Don't just, for 40 minutes, should not be doing what we're doing today. We should have stopped and done an activity in the middle of this session. We really should have. Not enough time. So interleave, mix those things up. Stop telling them what the revision questions are about. Just give them the revision questions. Don't even, so it's less work. Just leave stuff out. Leave things unfinished. Don't give students step-by-step instructions on how to do the experiment. The moment you give them step-by-step instructions, it's not science, it's a literacy test. I'm really serious. There's no science happening, it's a literacy test. On that. Can you follow my instructions? And so there is, leave stuff out. When I work with teachers and we build things, I bring instructions that are incomplete, and I never bring all the right materials. So, so we need 12 metric large nuts. Oh, I'm such an idiot. I never brought those. We just need something heavy. Can we find something heavy? Leave them a small problem. Get them to be motivated and show some initiative. These are features which, again, we want in our graduates. And we don't have to teach it separately, just a little change some of the time, each day, will make a world of difference. And you can start tomorrow. Had a question here? Yeah.
I'm talking about a slide in which you showed ideas, methods, values.
Yeah.
And there are 6 values were given.
Yeah.
And the second was fairness, and the 5th was the teamwork.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the fairness first. This fairness, how does it help in critical thinking or idea? That is one. Secondly, fairness and teamwork, they should come together. So is it there's some kind of priority in numberage? I mean,
no, it's not a priority.
Or is it just random?
It's not a priority list up there. Fairness it's one of the words which I would change. Fairness here means fair as far as a scientific test is concerned. All right, so I put 2 things on the balance. They seem balanced. I take one off. I do some stuff to it, but I put more sticky tape on the bag, put it back there, and go, oh, the weight's changed. That's not a fair test. So it's the idea of a proper control and a fair test. Teamwork and collaboration, again, you lay your classrooms out like this and you put yourself at the front, there's nothing about that which supports teamwork or collaboration or communication. So the first thing which we often do when we come into a room is we're going, well, it's not going to stay like that, is it? Take half the chairs out and put the tables around, get the chairs around that, and I'll go and move to the front, the back, and the middle, and the side. There is no front. You're not hiding. And you're working around the table. So I'm looking at you and we're discussing it. As you would have seen from those pictures, a lot of the stuff can and should be done in group work, at least occasionally. Yeah. Sorry, just wait, gentlemen. No, you've got the microphone. Stand.
Okay, so in fact, thank you for the insights what you have given. Though little late or beginning to start thinking on those lines in terms of STEM, I'm actually part of a group which is across India. We either do homeschool, unschool, unted. We get into makerspaces. We are working with the ghost cities, which is across the city where this gated communities have come up, but unfortunately there is no houses constructed, but land is lying there, and we are looking at organic lifestyle, self-sustained lifestyle, growing organic vegetables and all, and also giving experiential learning for the kids. So these are all in the process. We are also working with the government to see if we can get this homeschooled, unschooled, alternate education school kids explore on their own way, and they can write the NOS exams or international board exams. So we are working with all of that, and also looking at be it Steiner, be it Sudbury Valley, be it so all that, right? So my question is coming back to that. This is something which I didn't know until today or yesterday once I got the email about your background. So I just want to know how is it that we can partner with you, and also collaborate to see how train the trainers or enable some of us where we can actually get the tinkering spaces and the lab setup. So what we are doing right now is setting up these small transition points in and around the city, because people, for them to get out of the city.
Can you do it one-on-one, please?
Yeah.
Sure. Please
So,
go ahead.
short answer, remember my name, photograph it, look through Facebook, look at this logo, or send me an email at thesciencenomad@gmail.com, and we can talk. There's lots of people to point you towards. Yeah, sorry, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of the discussion on education reform tends to focus on reform on content, and you're talking about reform in pedagogy.
Yeah.
And you also made a remark about needing to recognize the inertia in the system. And pedagogic reform requires a reasonably secure teacher, whereas the vulnerability of teachers is often the biggest part of the inertia.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
So the question, your observation is right. I'm talking about a change of approach or an addition of approach, so it's a pedagogical change. Some of those things which I just mentioned, even if you're not a strong and confident teacher about those things, some of those things can be suggested and instructed to teachers to perform, even if they're not particularly aware or engaged with why these changes work. I'm a firm believer in trying to get people to understand things and work from that basis. But again, you've got, 50 million teachers in India, 100 million teachers, and you've got an enormous need. And so even some of those small changes, I'm hopeful and work and talk with education ministries about that bigger change, but I don't want your students to wait for that change. And some of this stuff can happen fairly quickly. And so it's working with organizations that are up the food chain. So I will work with pre-service teachers and training universities so that the teacher trainers can introduce a little bit of that approach. And so get some of the teachers ready to go and implement that as well. I would also advocate in the Indian context to think about establishing some pilot projects. Again, like any highly engaged democracy, you're going to spend a lot of time debating this, and that may or may not be a good thing. But in the process of doing that, if you're graduating and wasting 90% of your engineers, you're already wasting an enormous investment. And so to think of establishing some pilot projects to try some approaches in context of rural cities, urban cities, government cities, government schools, to establish some of those as pilot and test projects, I think would be powerful by way of case study and example. And that will give some data for the debates which are happening about what approach to take. And it's reasonable to have that debate, it's important. But, yeah.
May I've got 2-3 small questions. Firstly, your method that you are following, how the gradation is done, performance.
Yeah,
That
great.
is one.
Yeah.
And second, how do you measure creativity? If you don't have a formal examination or something.
Yep. So as I said, until such time as the rules in the school are changed, it will be hard to get any significant change in how the schooling happens. And so assessment and evaluation are really critical. The one thing which I'd just remind you, probably missed the slide, was I value creativity, I value innovation, I see those 21st century skills as essential. Just getting you curious, even if I'm not yet measuring it, if I can help you to stay curious, stay engaged, you're currently going to do better at your current assessments. So this isn't something which is either or. Starting this, we have data that says keeping them curious will help with their current, I think, poorly designed assessment. But it will still help with that assessment. So it removes one of the jeopardies, one of the risks. You go, we can't change, they might do bad at Pisa. And I understand that drive, but we've got data that says, start doing this, they will do better with literacy. So it's, for me, it's looking to the science of the learning to go, actually that isn't necessarily the problem. So we can move forward on some of that. I think we might have time for one more question. Perhaps we can hear from another lady.
I just had a tiny question, which was, can any of these principles be translated to adult learning? Or is this strictly for children and for growing up?
This is learning, and so it applies for everyone. So the ideas of kind of being curious, active recall, interleaving, if you're doing study in higher education, or the rest of these things, the idea of taking a break, studying something different, coming back to it, these are ideas that some students will do instinctively. So this stuff doesn't stop at school, certainly not at high school with that. Okay, one last question. This will be
thank you.
the last.
Thank you for entertaining. So some parts of Scandinavia are moving from STEM to STEAM to include art.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Art?
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. So my answer to that is I hate every acronym. All right? They're going, oh, what about robots? We need STREAM on there. What about computer science? We need SCREAM. Again, the STEM got things started as an acronym. I just wish it would disappear because it confuses everyone about that. And the not maths teachers, in schools that say, we've got to teach STEAM now, or STEM, it's taught as all right, it's mostly science, a bit of technology, and bugger all maths. Okay, you had to use a ruler to go and measure the stuff on the burette. Tick, we've done maths. Whoa, STEM project. No, there was no mathematical thinking, no higher thinking. And this acronym, as I said, it's been helpful, but it's not helpful. For me, it's not helpful now because it leads to this problem. Where's the humanities in that? If you can't spell, you're not doing anything. And no. Again, for me, it's put that aside. Look at the 21st century outcomes. Look at that list that we had up there. This is what we're aiming for. And whatever you do in teaching, it might be project-based learning, it might be cross-disciplinary. Those have got good outcomes. But heck, just focus on these 21st century skills. If whatever I'm doing is got a direct link to helping problem solving, critical thinking, I don't care if you're using crayons or a 3D printer. I really don't. That's the outcome. And again, calling it STEM means, I'm giving you a line following robot and a 3D printer and your school is now full of horrible plastic key rings. That's not helping anyone. All right? So, yeah, I understand where they're coming from. They go, everyone in, but don't worry about this. What's the outcome? What's the outcome?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
And that wraps up this evening. On behalf of the Australian Consulate in Chennai and the Australian High Commission overall in India, I want to thank you all for coming. We hope it's not the last event that we host at the Bangalore International Centre. I hope you've got a lot out of it. Please email Ravi Chanda and the Bangalore International Centre to tell him how much you enjoyed it. So he asked us that as well. And yes, hopefully we'll see Stuart again in Bangalore another time. But for now, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers.